then what we want and is hard to get is cannot be obtained by prayers or by vows or by appealing for it. Buddha said if you can get what you want by prayers or appeals or vows, then the Buddha said, why is there so much suffering in the world? The Buddha with his psychic eye can see that wolves are suffering, can see that animals are suffering, hell beings are suffering. Who is helping them? They are crying out every night and sometimes even the day, are crying out for help, especially like the hell beings. If there is a compassionate Bodhisattva or Buddha can help, why don't he help them? That's enough. Bring all these beings out of hell. But the Buddha says nobody can help. Our world is created by our karma and it's also created by our mind. So the world is like a nightmare. So unless we develop our mind, we keep having nightmares. Sorry, I have all this written all over the place. Okay, so because of wrong teachings, in the last half of the first century CE, that means from around maybe 75 CE, images of Buddha first appeared in Gandhara, place in India. Buddha statues were first created. So you look here, it's about 500 years after the Buddha passed away. The Buddha said that original Buddhism will last for 500 years. So when people practice original Buddhism, they understand the Buddha's teachings that we have to help ourselves. The Buddha said, no man can bless another. The Buddha said, our good actions will bless us, our evil actions will curse us. So karma is very important. So because people did not understand the Buddha's teachings, Buddha's statues started to appear 500 years after the Buddha passed away. People pray to Buddha statues and ask for help. And then in the 2nd century CE, there was a king called Kanishka. He came into power and his empire extended from Afghanistan to Central Asia over a vast piece of land. And then he liked Mahayana Buddhism, and under him Mahayana Buddhism developed, and he convened the 4th Sangha Council, where they compiled the Mahayana books together and put them down in writing. When these Chinese monks like Xuan Zhang and Fa Xian and all that, they came to India, they found that Mahayana Buddhism was flourishing side by side with this Hinayana Buddhism. And they also reported that actually Hinayana Buddhism was more popular than Mahayana Buddhism. There were more monks, more monasteries which were Hinayana. And then as time went on, by the time of I Ching, which was around 670, the differences between Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism was less and less, and the two traditions began to blend together. How is that? For example, like nowadays, even some Theravada monks believe in the Bodhisattva path, right? The Mahayana books talk about 6 paramis or 6 paramitas. Our Theravada books talk about 10 paramis. In other words, our Theravada books also accept the Bodhisattva path. But originally, Bodhisattva path was not the Buddha's teaching. Theravada these Hinayana monks, they started to accept. So that's why the differences became less and less. And then later, the esoteric Buddhism, secret school became popular and influenced Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. They started also to practice more mantras and all these things. Then the true Buddhism started to disappear. Now we come to this esoteric Buddhism, secret school. This secret school, why do they call it secret school? Because some of the teachings were very different from what the Buddha taught. For example, when this monk called Nagarjuna, who is called Long Subusa in Chinese, when he started to write the Mahayana books, and he brought out these Mahayana sutras, people asked him, this he has mentioned in his biography, he said people asked him, why is it before there were no such Mahayana sutras, now you claim these are the words of the Buddha? You know what he said? He said the Buddha hid these books in the ocean, and he went down to the dragon palace and he brought up these books which were hidden by the Buddha. This we cannot accept for various reasons. Firstly, these Mahayana books always talk about Mahayana and Hinayana, Taiseng, Asyo-seng. But during the Buddha's time, there was no Taiseng, Asyo-seng. The Sangha was one. That's the most important thing. Secondly, during the Buddha's time, there were no books. Nobody made books. So how could the Buddha have hidden away books? Thirdly, the Buddha said that his teachings are open for all to see. The true Dhamma is open for all to see. And the Buddha said, if anything is secretive, then it is deviant. If it's secretive, then you have something to hide, right? That's why you find in the secret school, they have secret teachings. For example, like mantras. Mantras came from Brahmanism, Hinduism, and these mantras are very powerful words. And these powerful words, they are so powerful. I like to say in Hokkien, 做廣頭是用照啦，驚廣頭是用照啦。To do black magic, they use mantras. To counter the black magic, they also use other mantras. To keep spirits, what we call kuikia, to control the kuikia, the spirits, they also use mantras. And then on top of that, they have, for example, what is called Tantric Buddhism. Tantric Buddhism comes from Tantra Yoga, things like the Kama Sutra, where they talk about the teacher can make love to the disciple to have sex, and they say this can lead to enlightenment. But the Buddha says that when we have sensual pleasures, it is impossible not to be attached to it. So the Buddha says sensual desires are an obstruction in the holy life. But these people, because they don't understand the Dhamma, then they teach all these things. And other things like they do a lot of rituals. And also in the secret school, they, like what is practiced in Tibetan Buddhism or Dhammaism, they go into a trance. Just like in this Maosan, the school of Taoism, which is corrupt. So all these things you find in the secret school. According to this Professor Hirakawa, that he says one of the most influential theories in East Asia divided Buddhist history into three periods: the true Dhamma, the counterfeit Dhamma, and the end of the Dhamma. So, true Dhamma, counterfeit Dhamma, and end of the Dhamma. True Dhamma is the first 500 years period after the Buddha passed away. That is the true Dhamma. And then the counterfeit Dhamma is when Hinayana Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism started. This period is called the counterfeit Dhamma. From about 50 BCE up to 700 CE. So that means about 500 years after the Buddha's passing away until about 1,200 years after the Buddha's passing away. So this counterfeit Dhamma, instead of relying on the Buddha's words in the suttas, in the Vinaya, they are more interested in new Mahayana sutras and also in the Abhidhamma, the Jataka tales and commentaries and Visuddhimagga and all these later books which the Buddha says actually are the words of disciples, not his words. And then the end of the Dhamma is the time where the secret school started, esoteric Buddhism. That is about 700 up to 1100 CE. That is the last 300 or 400 years of Buddhism in India. It's called the end of the Dhamma because at that time they were not practicing the Dhamma anymore. They are more interested in rituals like mantras, this tantric Buddhism, and going to trance and keeping spirits and all these things. That is not Dhamma at all. That's why even though the name Buddhism still continues, but that is the end of the Dhamma. No more Dhamma. They are not really interested in the Dhamma anymore. So here I like to summarize what's the difference between Hinayana Buddhism and original Buddhism. Is that Hinayana Buddhism, they are interested in the later books like the Abhidhamma, commentaries, etc., which is not the Buddha's words, although they acknowledge that the original words of the Buddha are found in the suttas and the Vinaya. Then secondly, what's the difference between Mahayana Buddhism and original Buddhism? Is that they reject the original suttas and they follow the Mahayana sutras. The original sutras are called Hinayana books by the Mahayana. And in the Sattva precepts, there is one precept where they are encouraged not to read the Hinayana books, the original discourses of the Buddha, and instead to propagate the Mahayana sutras. And they talk about paramis and the Bodhisattva path and all that. But actually, in the suttas, we find the Buddha said that he looked into the past 91 world cycles. That means one night the Buddha did not sleep. The whole night he was looking into the past. For 91 world cycles, which is an extremely long time. The Buddha said he only saw 6 Sambuddhas, 6 Buddhas who are willing to teach the Dhamma to the world. In other words, there are 99.99% of the Buddhas are Pacheka Buddhas. Buddhas who do not want to teach. That is why in the Isigiri Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha said at one time, outside Rajagaha, there were 500 Pacheka Buddhas. So you see, at any one time, you can find a lot of Pacheka Buddhas, but they all don't want to teach the Dhamma. That is the real fact. Now these Jataka stories, on which the paramis are based, if you look into them, they are too childish to be true. Jataka stories where animals can talk, where animals can behave more superior to human beings, and all this. And lastly, I'd just like to say that the Chinese version of the suttas, the Pali suttas, now left with them are called the Agama Sutras. And these Agama Sutras, when we compare them with the Pali Suttas, we find that they are very much deficient. For example, our Digha Nikaya, the Pali Digha Nikaya, the equivalent is called the Chang Ahan Jing. The Digha Nikaya has 34 suttas. In the Chang Ahan Jing, they have 30 suttas. In our Majjhima Nikaya, we have 152 suttas. They have 221, slightly more. In our Samyutta Nikaya, we have 2,872 suttas. They have 1,362, which is less than half. In the Anguttara Nikaya, we have 2,198 suttas. They have only 471 suttas, only about a quarter. Also, you find their Chang Ahan Jing, their long discourses come from the Dhammavuddho school. Their Chong Ahan Jing come from the Sarvastivadin school. The Cha Ahan Jing comes from the Sarvastivadin school. The Chuni Ahan Jing comes from they don't know where, an undetermined school. Why is this? Because they look down on these Hinayana, what they call the Hinayana Suttas. So they neglected these suttas, and over the centuries they lost these suttas. So after they lost these suttas, they tried to recover the suttas, and they only recovered part of it. So the suttas and the agamas are not as complete as our Theravada Pali suttas. It's mentioned by this historian that our Pali suttas are complete from the time of Emperor Asoka up to now. It's complete, we didn't lose our suttas. So our Theravada Nikayas are very complete. Now because the suttas are not complete, some of the things they say, the agamas are different from our Pali suttas. For example, our Pali suttas talk about 10 samyojana, 10 fetters. They only have 5 fetters. And we, in our suttas, we talk about liberation by mind and liberation by wisdom. But in our sutta, liberation by mind means liberation by mind as well as liberation by wisdom. But for them, they only have liberation by wisdom. And they say there's no such thing as the formless realm, whereas we have the formless realm. Also, in the Chinese version of the history of Indian Buddhism, they have a lot of stories. In Chinese Buddhism, there are a lot of stories. So, for example, they say that the Emperor Asoka tried to kill some monks who did not follow the orthodox school. He sent them off in a boat, and they got somebody to make holes in the boat, so that when the boat went halfway, the boat sank. And according to the stories, some of the Arahants helped the other monks to safety. This we find is impossible. You find the history of Asoka, he's so compassionate, he will not even want to kill animals. How can he kill human beings? And on top of that, monks, how dare he kill monks? So a lot of these stories in Mahayana Buddhism, we cannot believe. They even say that Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa, just because Mahakassapa was very famous. They say Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa. But in our Vinaya books, Ananda's preceptor was a monk called Belaka Sisa. And even this Professor Irakawa, he does not believe that Ananda's preceptor was Mahakassapa. Because in the Suttas and the Vinaya books, we find Mahakassapa and Ananda, many times they were not in agreement. So I will end the talk by saying that we have to remember this sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya 4.180, where the Buddha said that in future, if any monk says that such and such are the Buddha's words, we should compare it with original suttas and the Vinaya. Only if it follows the original suttas and the Vinaya can you take them to be the Buddha's teachings. Otherwise, reject them. And the last thing I'd like to say, is to notice that originally Theravada school followed only the suttas and the Vinaya, original suttas and the Vinaya. But nowadays, our Theravada school, we are already corrupted. We follow the Hinayana teaching. We follow, on top of the suttas and the Vinaya, we follow the Abhidhamma, we follow the commentaries, we follow the Visuddhimagga, we follow later books like the Pithakopadesa, and all that. So, what is being practiced nowadays is not really Theravada Buddhism, but Hinayana Buddhism. So, we should practice the original teachings of the Buddha, which is actually Theravada Buddhism. I end for here. Yes.
Any doubts or need any clarification? You may just take up, or you may come forward to ask question or make some sharing.
Sometimes in our Theravada, we normally say Buddha preached for 5 years, but sometimes in other Mahayana, they say 49 years. So, they explain the difference.
Yes. But this is only a minor difference, not so, and I'm not very clear why this is so. I read it somewhere, but I didn't keep it in my mind, so I can't tell you of that.
Yes, one question.
Just to ask, I heard someone mention this before. They say this Abhidhamma was not taught to the human beings by the Buddha, but they say the Buddha actually taught the Abhidhamma to the Devas. So I think when you can clarify this. Thank you.
Okay, this is found in the I'm not sure it's Abhidhamma books or written by Buddha Ghosa later. That when the Buddha spoke the Abhidhamma in heaven, 800 million devas became arahants. And this only shows ignorance of the suttas. If we look into the suttas, you find the Buddha said that arahants are only found in the human world. Only humans can become arahants. Only humans can become. Because you see, devas and devis, they have a very good life up there. They are not willing to struggle. We only make effort in the spiritual path when we see dukkha. So like nowadays, the world is quite materialistic, quite good. Everybody is enjoying life. Who wants to become a monk or a nun? Nobody wants to become a monk. Right? Only when you suffer, then only you think you want to become a monk or a nun. That's why the Buddha says in the suttas, I forgot exactly which sutta, but it is mentioned that arahants are only found in the human plane. A lot of people don't know that anagamins do not become arahants. Anagamins, they have done practically all their work already. So they are reborn in the fourth jhana plane in the Suddhabhasa heavens. From there, they pass away and enter Nibbana. They don't attain arahanthood. From there, they just enter Nibbana when they pass away. For devas and devis, they can become Sotapanna. It is mentioned in the suttas that sometimes when the Dhamma is spoken, these devas and devis, they like to come and listen. And when they listen and they understand the Dhamma, they attain stream entry. Okay.
Any more questions? I wish you can come here. It's to the mind, so we can share. Everyone can share your question here.
Bhante, if I say we are new to Buddhism, we do not really know what is the true teachings of the Buddha. We only hear from others. So when we try to share with our friends, if we did not share the true teachings of the Buddha, do the people who share the teachings of the Buddha will get that karma if they did not share the true teachings of the Buddha?
The Buddha says that intention is karma. Intention is very important. What is your intention? So, if your intention is to help people, but you help them in the wrong way, you don't create bad karma because your intention is not bad. But then, because you are bodoh, then they continue to be bodoh.
Yes, any more questions from the floor? Oh, okay. Like to ask Bhante to lead us for the translation in Mary.
How we think of all beings, Itavata Cha'am Hi Sampadam Punya Sampadam Sabbe Deva Sabbe Bhuta Sabbe Satta Anumodantu Sabba Sampati Siddhya Sadhu Sadhu Sadhu.
So, you probably noticing the map on the board here. We talk a bit about different Buddhist traditions, crash course on Buddhist history and traditions or whatever. You might have some, I'm sure, preconceived ideas about Buddhism, and you've heard of the Dalai Lama, Tibetan Buddhism. There's two major schools historically, which is right behind my head, Theravada and Mahayana. And then there's a third one, Vajrayana. So I'll just describe a bit about them generally and their beliefs, and a bit about how the sort of history behind them. I'm a Theravadan Buddhist. I'm with the Thai forest tradition. So Theravada Buddhism, I've got it down here. This is Sri Lanka here. This is Burma, according to my map. This is Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. So that's basically the indigenous Theravadan world, about 100 million people. So Thera means elders, meaning the Buddha's original monks, when the Buddha died, his senior monks, 500 enlightened arahants, fully enlightened, got together for 3 months, and they agreed upon 84,000 lines of his teachings. So the Theravada school adheres to these 84,000 lines, which is about 6,000 pages on the reading list I gave you. You get them all from Wisdom Publications in Boston, the suttas, all translated into English. And Vada means word of the elders or way of the elders. So Theravada basically means a tradition that sticks to the original teachings of the Buddha. So we're the only Buddhist tradition in the world that has that view, that sticks to Buddha's teachings as the ultimate highest authority in the religion. To us, it makes common sense, but we're the only ones, which I'll have to explain later. And then Mahayana. Maha means higher, Yana means wheel, like the Buddhist teachings is compared to a wheel with the Eightfold Path, right? I guess you knew that, right? I mentioned that before, the Eightfold Path. The wheel is probably the most common symbol in Buddhism. It's interesting, in the Buddha's lifetime, there weren't that many symbols. There was the wheel for the Eightfold Path, and there was the monk's robes and the bowl. I think that's about it for actual symbols. So Mahayana is geographically, it's everything north of Burma, like Tibet, China, Japan, Mongolia, parts of Russia, maybe Poland as well. For Monica. No, I don't. I think Poland's a bit more Catholic. But Russia for many centuries. Siberia has had some of this Vajrayana Mahayana tradition. Japan, Korea, and even down the coast, Vietnam is actually Mahayana. Even though it's so close to Thailand, Vietnam, the influence came down from China. So it's bigger. I'd say 60% of the Buddhist world, maybe something like 350 million Buddhists in total. Of course, that includes nominal Buddhists, so how do we know? But maybe something like 200 million, something like that, in the Mahayana. And then Vajrayana is kind of the pride of Tibetan Buddhism. It's not just in Tibet, it's also parts of China. Vajra means diamond-like or indestructible. And Yan again means wheel, so in their view, it's the third wheel of Buddha's teachings. Because they would regard Theravada, or the first wheel, as the Hinayana, mean little wheel. So you get these wheels, little wheel, bigger wheel. They say the Buddha, he turned the wheel of Dharma, so his arm is getting pretty tired at the second time, third time. So this is the image. Anyways, so what do they believe? What's the differences? A lot of similarities, of course. Some important differences. Well, Theravada, I would say, of course, you're going to think I'm biased, is the purest form of Buddhism, the real, true teachings of Buddhism. But I would say there's really no controversy among scholars all over the world that Theravada is the closest to the original form of Buddhism, least changed form of Buddhism. They stick to the suttas, the Pali suttas. So what is the view and the goal of the Theravada? The view is to follow the Arahant ideal. So Arahant, this is a fully enlightened person, man, woman, or child in some cases. So the purpose of your life, to give you finally the last course tonight after 4 class, to give you your money's worth, purpose of your life is to become an Arahant. Yay! But if you don't do it in this lifetime, well, you can work up to this 4 stages of enlightenment. So that's the Arahant ideal. So the view is to follow the Eightfold Path, the Buddhist teachings. The goal is to get enlightened, make it to Nibbana. People say Nibbana, and Mahayana they say Nirvana. It's just this translation of Pali versus Sanskrit languages, same thing. Yeah, so that's pretty straightforward. So the Mahayana has a different view and a different goal. Woo! Now what? Oh. The view of the Mahayana is the Bodhisattva ideal. Actually, the longer version of this course you can get on my YouTube video called, I didn't tell you earlier, it's called The Taboo History of Buddhism, 1 and 2. It's over 40 minutes long. It's getting a lot of hits at about 600 right now. So in a sense, this is what I'm describing. Particularly the first 1,000 years of history is perhaps the biggest taboo in the religion. Not discussed in polite company or discussed amongst insiders within traditions. I should point out, though, Buddhism has no history of real conflicts over this. Like, there's never been a religious war in Buddhist history. Compare that to other religions, a pretty good record. But there's differences of view. So the view and the goal of the Mahayana is the Bodhisattva ideal. And the Bodhisattva ideal is a teaching that you should forego your own enlightenment in favor of the enlightenment of others. So you should work for the enlightenment of others, put others first, and help them along their spiritual path, and deliver everyone to enlightenment until you yourself are the last one to jump over the line and get enlightened. So it's very altruistic, ideal, and the highest value in Mahayana Buddhism is compassion, right? I'm sure you've seen Dalai Lama videos. He talks about compassion and kindness, compassion. Whereas the highest value in Theravada Buddhism is, can you guess? I'm sorry, it's happiness. Happiness is the highest ideal. So Buddha describes nirvana as the highest bliss, the highest happiness. So that's the highest value, to be happy. And I should point out before you think we're all narcissistic, selfish people, if you've ever been around someone who's like really happy, it makes you happy just to be around them, right? So the happier you are, the happier you can make other people. But so the Mahayana, the highest value is compassion. So it's an altruistic kind of a deal. So carrying on this Bodhisattva ideal, I actually took the Bodhisattva ideal back in 1991 because what you do not realize must not be told. Because I was the Mahayana Buddhist to begin with. I started off as a Tibetan Buddhist with the Shambhala Center in Vancouver. It was a wonderful period in my life, my first 2 years, my honeymoon phase with Buddhism. So I took the Bodhisattva ideal. And then years later, I've been with Ajahn for 11 years now. He said to me, I advise you to renounce the vow. So I renounced the vow. He even said, Brian, in these classes that you teach there in Vancouver, you ask people, if any of them have ever taken the Bodhisattva vow. Some people go to a meeting or retreat, they take the vow, I'm not too sure what they're doing. So if any of you have taken the Bodhisattva vow, I advise you to renounce the vow. I'll have to explain that as well. So different view, different goal. So the Bodhisattva ideal, and the goal is actually a different goal because their nirvana is different than our nibbana, which is a strange thing to say. I guess put it in simple terms. Back to the graph of the realms of existence. The Buddha taught that nirvana completely transcends samsara, right? And back to the pie graph, here's nirvana. So samsara, this term here, see samsara, means basically all the 5 realms of existence, all the cycle, even heaven and hell and human. It's all part of cyclic existence. So the goal is to get off the wheel of life, right? And make it to nirvana. So nirvana is separate from, transcends, it's beyond samsara from Theravadan view. It's a great essay about this you should read on my website by the legendary Bhikkhu Bodhi, our greatest scholar monk. He's actually an American monk. He's been a monk for about 42 years. He said the view of nirvana and samsara in the Mahayana Buddhism, which is from a Theravada view, outrageous. This is the idea that nirvana and samsara are inseparable. They're kind of a oneness, that attaining enlightenment, being in nirvana, is intermingled, inseparable from samsara. So from Theravada view, this contradicts what the Buddha taught. So the concept of nirvana is different. Might not affect your meditation practice too much, but it's a different goal. So this is a Mahayana teaching on emptiness and non-duality. The Buddha didn't teach non-duality. There's lots of literature on this, and Vaidya is really into non-duality. Like the Hindu school of Vaidya is actually started around 1000 AD, was based upon Mahayana Buddhism, school which really developed by around 480, this idea of non-duality. So the Hindu non-duality and Zen and Tibetan non-duality is really close in bed with each other, but the Theravadins don't agree with this view. So what I'm saying is, say Tibetan and Zen is a bit closer to Hindu Vaidya than actually to what the Buddha taught. So this is getting complicated. So I guess to really give your money's worth, the point is you should investigate a bit of Buddhist history. Back in 1991 when I started, there was no Google. I couldn't Google Buddhist history. I didn't know, right? And it became one of the biggest issues of my spiritual life. After about 2 years, I moved to Thailand and checked out, Buddhist history in the Thai tradition, Theravada, because I was Tibetan Buddhist, and I realized I'd been misled, I had it wrong. I was misled about history, and it was a big deal until about 1998. So when I wrote Freeing the Buddha in 1999, one of the themes was my own personal study of Buddhist history and getting it right, starting off the right foot. So I want to save you about 7-8 years of your time here. But now, so of course I'm saying, you should investigate this for yourself if you have an interest, of course. And don't take my word for anything. You just Google Buddhist history, it will be right there. The splits, the schisms, the rise of Mahayana, how this developed. But if you're with a particular tradition, you wouldn't really know unless you go to a library or go online and dig things up. most traditions, like in other religions, have their version of history, right? Their version of what happened. So it's disparate views within Buddhist tradition. So as long as you know that, then you can have some sense of asking the question, well, what did the Buddha teach? What are the real teachings of the Buddha? So if you have that question in mind, well, you'll get to the Pali Sutras. Let's write that down. So the Theravada teachings are based upon, so Pali is the language is written on, and suttas, that's the Pali term for, it literally translates from the mouth of the Buddha, an actual discourse of the Buddha. And there's thousands of them. Yeah, so different view, different goal, Bodhisattva ideal. And then the Vajrayana, just explain that. It's like, for instance, the Dalai Lama, they teach what is called the three yana approach. Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana. It's all part of like stages of the path, like beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So Vajrayana began around 600 AD, and Mahayana began around 50 BC. Where the Buddha lived, around 5th century BC. Richard Gombrich is actually perhaps one of the greatest living Buddhist historians today. He estimates the lifespan of the Buddha is about 485 BC to 405 BC. He lived for 80 years. So any books on Richard Gombrich, I certainly recommend. There's a lot of them. So Vajrayana is interesting. This is Tibetan Buddhism, which is most popular in the West, partly because of the diaspora of the Tibetan people since 1959, so they spread around. And Tibetans learned English. They went to India, and they learned English, and they came to America and Europe. Whereas like Thailand, population of Thailand is 10 times bigger than Tibet, right? Tibet's only 6 million people. But the Thais are quite comfortable with that. They're one independent kingdom for 1,000 years, so they're not really motivated to come to America and learn English and spread the word. So Tibetans become quite successful. So what's the Vajrayana about? Well, it's kind of a combination of things. You call it the term syncretic, means a mixture. It's a mixture of Mahayana Buddhism with some Hindu ideas. A lot of their deities and chants and practices are like copycat with the Hindus. Hindus copy the Tibetans, Tibetans copy the Hindus. If you're in Nepal, you can go into a Tibetan Buddhist temple, walk across the street to a Hindu temple. You can't even tell the difference. Was that Hindu? Was that Tibetan Buddhist? So it borrows a lot from Hinduism. Also, the pre-existing religion in Tibet prior to Buddhism arrived rather late, about 7th century AD. The Bon was the B-O-N. Bon was the previous religion, which is shamanism, animistic type of religion. So what uniquely happened in Tibet is the Bon priests got kind of subsumed within the hierarchy of Tibetan Buddhism. So Tibetan Buddhism combines some of the shamanic magical. So Tibetan has this kind of magical, channeling, and quite a bit of working with deities. It's the term Tantra, taken from Hinduism. Tantra means working with deities or working with energies. So some of the practices are quite far out and quite, not accepted by the Theravada school. But some of the breath meditation, like when I was first taught, was fine. I mean, they do a technique, see the Shambhala Center, where you're following the breath, you're following the out breath. The in breath just happened to snatch, you follow the out breath. You label your thoughts sinking. I mean, it's fine, the variation. So some Tibetans have adapted themselves more to sort of American thinking, but it's a real mixed bag in Tibetan Buddhism. A lot of other things that go with it, like 100,000. They do practices called prostration, 100,000 prostrations, do 108 a day, and you do this for 3 years. Count it, like 108. What's 100,000? 108,000. It's 1,000 days. What's 1,000? That's 3 years, right? So I lived in a Tibetan Buddhist center, Karmacholing in Vermont, and downstairs you hear people going thunk, thunk, full-length prostrations. You do that for 3 years. And after that, you do 3 years of mantra, 3 years of mandala, and 3 years of guru yoga. So it's long practices. And maybe there's some value to it, but the Buddha didn't teach those practices. And a lot of it's based on devotion to the guru. You see a picture of your guru, or you visualize you. Actually, I've got a picture of Brian Rue here in my wallet. So I'll stick it up here, and I want you to have devotion for Brian Rue's photo here, and go home and do this practice for 3 years. So you wonder, why do you do this? So It's complex, a lot of different practices. So getting back on why would I recommend you renounce the Bodhisattva ideal? We had Zongzar Khyentse Rinpoche, was here years ago, had hundreds of people meeting in Richmond, taking the Bodhisattva vow. It's a big deal, advertised, you pay quite a bit of money for this weekend retreat. Take the Bodhisattva vow. Well, the problem with it, according to my tradition, is you're taking a vow not to get enlightened. You're taking a vow to forego your own enlightenment and help others. Sounds nice, but it's just causing it to have a lot more suffering for thousands of years. You promise actually after your death, part of the vow is you're going to come back to human birth to keep helping others. So you keep helping others and you keep coming back. So it really prolongs your time in samsara, perpetual rebirths. So the Theravada view is the Arhat ideal. You should make efforts towards your own enlightenment. And when you do get enlightened in that last lifetime, you can do probably a lot more to help others in that last lifetime. Then you sort of pop off to nirvana. So what happened over the centuries is some people got upset that when someone attains enlightenment, they're never coming back, which is true. Technically, it's not possible for an enlightened person to take rebirth. So some people felt kind of hurt by that and kind of abandoned. You're just going to leave us? Like mom's just going to abandon the children? So somebody invented this idea, the Bodhisattva ideal, you keep coming back. But within the Mahayana school, they had kind of a technical problem because, the Theravadins, they're getting enlightened, right? They're producing arhats, so they're getting enlightened. But if we're coming back, we're not enlightened. They're enlightened, we're not, so that's not good. So they changed the laws of the universe somewhere around, 1st century AD. And Mahayana decided that, you can get enlightened, right? And be as a bodhisattva, and after you die, you can still come back because you've got so much compassion. Somehow you can do it. So they defy the laws of physics. So they say, they're enlightened bodhisattvas. They get people, they get enlightened and they come back. And it's common for Tibetans to feel that their guru, was enlightened and came back, enlightened, came back, and so that's how they kind of get over that loophole.
And Zen? Oh
yeah, Zen. Well, Zen is within the Mahayana school. It arose in China around 520 AD with the Bodhidharma, who came from India. No one's really sure what his tradition was. So he was a bit disillusioned with Pure Land, which is very sort of ostentatious and grandiloquent temples. So Zen has an emphasis on sitting meditation, a direct experience, and kind of a renouncing of the fancy temples and statues and all of that. So a lot of Zen centers, they don't even have a statue of the Buddha. It's very simplified. So the emphasis is on sitting. Like, say, the Japanese tea ceremony or the Chinese tea, this simplicity. So it actually came from China. The Chinese word is Chan, C-H, apostrophe A-N. And then when it went into Japan, just the Japanese word for Chan is Zen. So emphasis. It still has a Mahayana worldview about things like samsara and nirvana and inseparable and non-duality and things. But I guess the meditation practice is closer to the Theravada school. So Theravada and Zen, a lot of groups even combine a bit of Theravada and Zen in terms of practice. Pure Land I should mention because you're going to the big Chinese temple where I used to work in 1997. So Pure Land is, the scholars aren't quite sure how it arose, but it was around the 2nd century AD. It's a fascinating change in history. In Kashmir, India, there was a Buddhist king by the name of Kushana. Well, the king himself wasn't Buddhist, but Kushana ruled over Kashmir, Afghanistan, and Iran. And Iran was the center of the Zoroastrian religion where they had the sun god worship. And so that's one theory of how Pure Land came about. Because in Pure Land, they worship Amitabha Buddha, which is a cosmic Buddha of infinite light and everlasting length of life. So in Pure Land, they worship this cosmic Buddha and actually chant. They go, Amitabha. I was on BCTV News in 1997 because doing this chant, walk meditation, because Brad Pitt had the movie 7 Years in Tibet. So they wanted to go to a Buddhist temple, film something. So I was their public relations official. So they had us filming. We're going, Amitabha. So it is a worship religion. The W word we don't really have in Theravada tradition. Like we don't worship in Buddhism, but in Pure Land they do worship. But another theory of how it came about is it might have been indigenous influences in India, within Mahayana Buddhism in India, or a combination of other influences. But somehow they invented Amitabha Buddha, which does not exist in the Theravada view. And I've been to the other one on the number 5 road in Richmond. It's the biggest one in Canada now. When I worked at the one at Stephenson Highway in Richmond, it was the largest Buddhist temple in Canada. It's in the back of my paperback. Brian Root teaches the largest Buddhist temple in Canada. So I was at the one just a few months ago in number 5 road in Richmond. We're all standing there chanting Amitabha, maybe, about 50 or 60 Chinese. And then we all bow to the ground and stand up and reading some more, chant, 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 bow. It's very alien to what the Buddha taught. Yeah, so we would say Pure Land is one of the furthest away from Buddhism. Tibetan has more sophistication. Lama Suradas, a famous American Tibetan Lama, he was here years ago. And I think I asked him about the Pure Land. He said, well, this is what he said. He said, well, at least they're not doing something else with their hands. So it shows the disdain Tibetans have for the Pure Land. They're both forms of Mahayana. And it's nothing political about Tibet and China. It's a very simplistic worship type religion. They teach, when you die, then Amitabha will come to your deathbed and you chant his name with faith and devotion. He'll take you to his Pure Land in the West, somewhere in space, millions of miles in space, and you'll be reborn. This Pure Land called Sukhavati, and you'll be reborn in a lotus flower. And when that lotus flower blooms, you will attain enlightenment. So it's quite far out, and somebody invented this in the 2nd century AD in Kashmir. So the principle to understand, though, if two religions have an amicable relationship, whether it's Zoroastrian and Mahayana Buddhism or Mahayana something else, then often people invent a hybrid, right? You see that in our culture, hybrids all the time, right? Yoga and meditation retreats, this and that. So people invent hybrids. So it might have been the Iranian sun god, which became Amitabha Buddha. Edward Kansa was a great British Buddhist historian back in the 1950s. His view is it came from the Zoroastrian religion, but other historians today, some disagree, some have other theories. No one really knows. But the point is, it's not Buddhism. So we regard it as another religion. It's another religion. See, the problem is, we didn't retain the copyright back in the 5th century BC on Buddhism. We didn't copyright the B word that we own Buddhism. Just anybody can call anything they want Buddhism. Oh gosh. Then there's the Nichiren sect from Japan, which is here in Vancouver as well, called Sugaka Genkai. 50 million people in Japan. It was invented 1300 AD in Japan by this monk called Nichiren. And they chant the name of the Lotus Sutra. They chant, what do they chant? They chant Nam Go Renge Ho, Nam Go Renge Ho, Nam Go Renge Ho. If you walk into their temple on Marine Drive at Canby, and I've done this for a tour, 100 people chanting Nam Go Renge Ho. It has almost nothing to do with Buddhism. I mean, maybe it's good. It's a form of concentration. Chanting calms your mind. I'd say there's nothing wrong with it. It'd be better if they didn't call it Buddhism. But millions and zillions of people. And they call it Orthodox Buddhism. So if you're not educated about the difference, it's hard in the West, cities like Vancouver and everywhere else. Every single Buddhist tradition in the world is in one place, in one city like Vancouver, New York, Chicago. So if you're new at this, oh boy, who knows what's going to happen to you, right? So my concern, what's going to happen to you after 50 minutes from now? Well, I was 5 minutes late. Okay, what's happening to you at 5 minutes after 9 tonight? So if you have any interest in Buddhism, I have compassion for you. So I want to give you money's worth, give you a heads up, so you can do your own digging and research. People have said to me, well, why don't people just go to whatever tradition they feel is right for them? What do you feel is right for you? But what about truth, huh? What about the Buddha, huh? What about what the Buddha taught? What he wanted you to? What about history? Not just how you feel, right? But the good news, I think, is we still have the Buddha's teachings that are extant after 25 centuries. We still have the full entire Pali Suttas, translated in English, and the future's still hopeful, You can still find it. And within Mahayana, there's still a lot of good practice going on as well. And I think there's a bit less, perhaps, arrogance between the schools, because we used to be geographically separated for centuries, right? Like down here and up there. But now we're together. There's some connections and stuff, so people are a bit more polite, I guess, in their relationship or discourse. Because I guess one of the disadvantages that the Mahayana have is they call themselves the higher wheel, they're the big wheel, and they call Theravada the Hinayana, which translates usually as lesser wheel, but it's actually the real translation a bit less polite than that. So it's meant to be a derogatory term. So it's in order just to be a Mahayana, you've got to have a Hinayana. I mean, in order for you to be higher, somebody's got to be lower than you. So the very fundamental fabric of their scriptures is that they're higher than the Theravada and they're lower. So it's within the fundamental Theravada teachings, the Mahayana didn't exist, right? No reference to it. Didn't exist till 5th century BC. So it's kind of hard for them to balance that, because they have to be superior because they're the higher wheel. So it is definitely in their literature and their teachings that the Hinayana is lower, elementary school. I mean, got Brian Rue at the West Side Community Center. Well, that's just Hinayana, right? You want the higher teachings. Go to big, also, what do people want to think? There's a big Chinese temple in Richmond, 2 of them, right? Huge things, well-organized, zillions of dollars. They must be advanced, right? Then, meeting room number 2 at the West End Community Center with 4 people in Brian Rue's class. So what are you going to think, right? That's why I like to support the Theravada forest tradition. At least it's the largest organization actually in the world of Westerners.
Do they have schools?
Do
they have schools like the Mahayana?
Oh yeah. Well, even Theravada has schools like in Thailand. They have Buddhist schools, even for kids, high school students, Buddhist universities. You mean it's Mahayana have Buddhist schools here? You mean? I guess I've been to. There's the Golden Buddhist Monastery in Main Street in 11th. It's another Pure Land temple. What's nice about them is they gave us the land for our monastery near San Francisco, by Aguirre, which is very generous of them, right? Zillions of dollars of land. Because their Master Ho, in his will, when he died, he left it to us. So we're pretty chummy with them. And I've been there, the Sunday school for the kids, with all these Chinese kids and the Chinese teacher. And they were teaching in English because a lot of the Chinese kids, most of them spoke English. Yeah. So they have some level of organization, certainly. Okay, I've been lecturing too long. We should have some questions and discussions. So did I cover everything? Of course, this is just a thumbnail sketch.
What do the Mahayana say about the Theravada? That just they are the lower?
Well, I mean, it depends who you talk to. They'll say different things. I guess officially according to their scriptures, right? Yeah, the Theravada is the Hinayana, the lower teachings. So they would say that the Theravada is the teachings of the Buddha. No dispute. They say, yes, it is. And the Buddha in his wisdom, he gave these elementary teachings for people with blunt faculties, that they actually say in their scriptures. If you talk to Mahayanas, I talk to them often. I remember when I was a Tibetan Buddhist in Vermont, I was going to go to Nepal. That was my plan. But they said, no, go to Thailand first, do some retreats there for a couple of months. And they recommended Ajahn Buddhadasa, They said he's like the Chogyam Trungpa of Thailand, who was our guru at that time, Tibetan master. So they were quite favorable about Thailand and Thai practice. In practical terms, they thought it was good. So a lot of the people would even go to Theravadan temples and retreats, and a lot of people go back and forth. Or I know a Theravadan Buddhist student of mine, he married a Tibetan Buddhist woman, things are going fine with them. They go to trips to Nepal together, then they go on Theravadan retreats together. So. But I should mention in terms of the scriptures of the Mahayana, after they were founded in 50 BC, in order to I guess, justify themselves. They wrote new and improved discourses of the Buddha. So we have about 6,000 pages of Pali Sutras. Then they wrote Mahayana Sutras. They use an R. Sutras. That's just a Sanskrit spelling. So if you ever see Sutras, that should be a red flag. So for about a period of 800 years, they wrote over 10 to 15,000 pages of brand new discourse of the Buddha. So these are regarded as counterfeit discourses of the Buddha. So that's significant. Yeah, so I tell a funny story in my first book, Freeing the Buddha. I had a lawyer in my class, Chilwin, and he said he wants to go to source documents because he's a lawyer, so fine. So I went to Banyan Books, our spiritual bookstore here in Vancouver, to get the Pali Suttas. He said, could I please have the Pali Suttas? And the girl working there said, we're out of them, But we got the Diamond Sutta, we got the Flower Ornament Sutta. These are Mahayana Sutras, big, huge texts. And he said, no, thanks. So he left with cash in hand. And actually, the joke is they did have the Pali Sutras there. They're locked under glass at the Long Discourse of Buddha, the Middle Length Discourse, but they don't sell them very often. The girl was just unfamiliar with them. So she lost the sale. So the irony there, this is the real teachings of the Buddha. This lawyer wanted to buy the real teachings, and they didn't offer it to him, but they're offering him the counterfeit discourses, the Diamond Sutra, Adamasaka Sutra, the Lotus Sutra. These are famous sutras, but people generally know they are not the discourse of Buddha. Even like Mahayanas themselves, a lot of them know it's not the teaching of Buddha, but a lot of them don't know. They're not actually taught that it's not. So the way they explain this, just to make a long story longer, they say, well, the Buddha in his wisdom, he taught the Mahayana discourses during his lifetime on earth, but he taught them to the devas, the heavenly beings, and the devas recorded this, so as in the future he could revivify the doctrine after it slept into decline. So after about 4 or 5 centuries, when things were slipping into decline, the devas or the nagas, these are like Loch Ness Monster or Ogopogo and Okanagan. These are nagas from a Buddhist view. These are real type creatures. So they say, well, the nagas hid the Mahayana teachings in subterranean caves underwater, you see. And then they were revealed to Nagarjuna about 50 BC. He was a Mahayana saint, and so they would be revealed and made known to the world. So Nagarjuna came upon these Mahayana sutras. So that's the official story in Mahayana generally in the world, where the teachings came from, that they're channeled from devas who got it to the Buddha. So that means, say you're receiving something, say you have a lot of caffeine in your coffee, and, hey, I'm receiving something, write it down. Oh man. In fact, I even have a section in my book, chapter called Changing Buddha's Words from 380 to page 390. It's really the most heavy information. There's a section called How to Write a Sutra. So how you, in the comfort of your own home, can write a new and improved discourse of the Buddha. So say you have some political agenda, you want to be a vegetarian, or say you want to protect the rights of animals or whales, you can write a sutra from the Buddha, Mahayana Sutra. So, bit of sarcasm there, of course. Yeah, so this went on and on. Then after around 8th century AD, they just said, okay, we're going to stop this, 50,000 pages, better put a lid on this, better, got to keep as believable as we can. Yeah, so it's interesting if you compare the Catholics to the Protestants. They have differences in views, but they have the same set of books, right? They have the same Bible. Whereas the Theravadins and the Mahayanas have a different set of books. The Pali Suttas and the Mahayana Sutras, a totally different set of books. However, I have to give some credit to the Chinese. The Agamas is the Chinese translation of the Pali Sutras. So the Chinese have all of the Buddhist real teachings, all the Pali Sutras translated in Chinese, called the Agamas. In fact, one Chinese woman, she was a regular student of mine about 10 years ago, and she found a Chinese temple here in Vancouver that actually follows the Agamas, like a Theravada Chinese tradition in their own language. But the Tibetans don't have that much. They don't have the Agamas. Yeah, so it's deliberately made to be obfuscated, meaning this is difficult to figure out because they're trying to hide it from you. They're trying to make it difficult. They're trying to hide the truth from you. It's just like the New World Order conspiracy theories. Woo! Oh, I gotta stop this. Gotta be normal with teacher someday. Actually, I'm pretty light about this. When I discovered this around 1998, before I met Ajahn and so on, I felt kind of paranoid. Like, I'm the only Theravadan in the city that knows, I'm the only one who knows the truth. I felt kind of isolated. Then I met Ajahn and sort of course, he knows all this stuff, and he took him into much more detail. In fact, the very first day I met him, he was giving a talk on this to a group of Laotians and Thais, Theravadan insiders, so he really kind of spilled the beans. So now I'm more relaxed about it, a bit more clinical, funny about it, But in the late 1990s, I was really serious about this, It's a big weight of the world on my shoulders, It's like, the early investigators into the Kennedy assassination. They just said, oh my God, Lyndon Johnson was behind it, oh my God. They feared for their life, can't talk. But now I'm more relaxed. Hey, I could just laugh about it. So I want to save you years of anguish and mental turmoil on your Buddhist path ahead of you. See, stop me. You should ask questions. Stop me from carrying on like this. So 7.5 minutes left. Before we talk about anything else, summarize the whole course, meditation, Four Noble Truths, karma, dispelling depression, loving kindness. Any feedback from the course? What parts were good for you? What parts were sort of muddled for you or needed more work? Were you healed? So I've already mentioned the next 4 weeks, next Thursday. It doesn't have to be entirely mindfulness, meditation, well-being. I mean, it could go into aspects of Buddhism as well. Usually my meditation class, people ask questions anyways about Buddhism, so it does not limit it just meditation. We'll be doing more meditation. Because right now the enrollment's low. They don't have the minimum. I think the minimum is 4 or 5. So you could save the class. I should always ask for referrals. That's something I always forget to do. Tell your friends about referrals. They say referrals are really the best way for courses to grow, word of mouth. Because advertising tends not to have that much of an effect, rather than just people hearing it from a friend. Of course, that's a tough pill to swallow. Small class, I guess people haven't been doing word of mouth. And the following Sunday, June 3rd, I'm sure you all have this in your calendars, my next one-day retreat in Falls Creek. So we'll be doing that 10:30 to 4:30. It's mainly just a meditation day. It's called Mindfulness Meditation for Well-Being. It's on my website. And actually, I was going to send out the mass email. Since you're on my emails, probably getting that next couple of days. That's just by donation. We usually get like 15 people, sometimes more, sometimes 20. Potluck lunch, and you can come for any portion of the day if you want. Ajahn Sonia has that policy on retreats. People can just come and go. It's not like they lock the doors at 9 a.m. and no one can get in to disturb the peace. Because I know in Thai tradition, it's all very kind of loose and casual. Temples, people come and go and they chit-chat and make noise. So it's a nice setting in the retreat center. It's a top floor of a co-op with outdoor sun deck, lots of space, full kitchen, seats about 40 people. Yeah, my friend Jesse lives in the co-op, so he gets us the room for free. Yeah, so it's also some continuity. Most people last summer who've been with me before on previous retreats to get to know a bit of the meditation community,
I have a question about Vipassana meditation and the different, from the Mahayana point of view or Theravada, or I know about the Vipassana retreats, 10 days of silence.
Yeah, what are those about, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, I should mention, first off, I recorded a YouTube video of Ajahn Sona called, I think it's called Different Views on Vipassana Meditation. So he goes into that. But the term, actually, in our tradition, we don't use the word or emphasize it that much, Vipassana. What it means, it translates in Pali language as insight, which is good. So it basically means, practice leading to insight. So the Buddha used the term samatha-vipassana, meaning calm and insight. So the meditation we've been doing is basically samatha, meaning the breath, loving kindness, walking. It's calming meditation. So when you stabilize the mind, then it can lead to insight. But the word vipassana, I think since the 1940s, has become like a brand name. It's almost something apart from Buddhism itself. It's like the Vipassana religion. I guess that's okay. But there's different understandings about it. Yeah, Mahayana and Theravada have similar